you ever have used an aluminum lever to check whether your cabinets are hanging plumb or horizontal, then you may have noticed that the aluminum will leave some dark marks on your cabinet. And that is something we like to avoid. And an easy way for this not to happen is just to add some masking tape on your level. That will cover the aluminum so it doesn't touch the cabinet, and you will not have this problem ever again. If you're having pot lights in a wall cabinet and you have installed them as I have shown in another video, I can highly recommend that you cut away a little bit of the top of the cabinet before you hang that cabinet up on the suspension rail. If you don't do that, you will have problems running that wire from the pot light down to the underside of the wall cabinet where you may have your power supply sitting. And if you don't do that, that wire might be pinched between the hanging bracket and the suspension rail on the wall, and you don't want that to happen. So make sure to cut away that little bit of material as you see in the picture, and you will have no problems running that wire from the top to the bottom behind the cabinet. To me, installing an Ikea kitchen is not just about getting the job done. It's about getting the job done in the best possible way. And sometimes you have to go out of your way just to add that little bit of extra that makes the installation better. This is one of those cases. That single cabinet you see there right at the door, if you don't secure that into the floor, it would be sitting there wobbling forever, because in the opening on the left side of that cabinet we have the stove, and that means that the cabinet is not secured into a cabinet on either side or into the wall on either side, and that means that that cabinet will be wobbly. It is of course secured into the countertop that is sitting on top, but that countertop is not secured into anything, so that will be an unstable solution, and we don't like those. So what can you do about it? Well, what I do about it in many cases is I take one of the island support brackets and I secure it into the floor and the cabinet into the bracket. And that means that now the cabinet is not only secured into the wall, it's also secured into the floor, and it would be a much more solid and stable solution. So go ahead and do that if you have a cabinet sitting all by itself. This tip is very much related to the previous one, because now we have a single cabinet sitting next to a wall. If you don't secure that cabinet into the wall, it might as well be sitting there on its own. So I always do that. What you need in order to do so is that you need a long screw that is long enough to go from the inside of the cabinet into the wall, but not just in through the drywall. It needs to be able to go into the stud behind the drywall. So first you have to mark where you have your stud, then you have to measure the distance from the wall to the cabinet, and then you cut a little piece of material to sit in between, because that is important. If you don't do that and you just put a screw into the cabinet and you will pull that towards the wall, the side of the cabinet will not be flat anymore. So if you have drawers in there, they will not operate smoothly. So cut a piece of scrap material and squeeze that in between before you add your screw that goes directly into a stud, and then you firmly pull it together and you will have a very solid and very stable cabinet now. So what do you do if you have to install a kitchen in an apartment where the wall is made from flimsy metal studs? Well, I had that experience a few years back, and when I hung the suspension rail with those special screws that goes into a metal stud, I could simply take it down with my bare hands. No tools necessary. The stud was so flimsy that there was no way that those few screws with 16" on center would hold that rail. So I had to do something very different. What I did is I went out and I picked up some plywood, and I cut that plywood to match the footprint of the wall cabinets and the base cabinets. And I could now secure that piece of plywood into those flimsy metal studs with a lot more screws than I could with my rail, because I could have screws in every single metal stud in the whole height of the plywood. And that means that that plywood was sitting much firmer onto the wall than I could ever do with the suspension rail. Of course, that plywood should have been sitting behind the drywall. That would have been much better, but the builder had no interest in doing so. And I needed to make sure that those cabinets would stay onto the wall and don't fall down. So this was basically my only solution to fix that problem. So if you ever get in that situation, you can do that too, but I highly recommend not to end up in that situation, because what you should do, if you have the room, you could put plywood all over and then another sheet of drywall. And then you will have a much better foundation for hanging those cabinets. But this is a tip for you, and it's giving with no warranty whatsoever. But this is what I did, and as far as I know, those cabinets are still hanging on the wall. And it's been 2 years, so I think they will stay.